David Quammen is an internationally renowned science writer and journalist. He's written 7 books of nonfiction and countless articles and essays. His interests include, among other things, ecology and evolutionary biology and infectious disease. Todd Wilkinson interviewed Quammen for our latest edition of Mountain Outlaw magazine this summer, and Quammen's 2012 book, Spillover, predicted the COVID-19 pandemic. Here's an excerpt from the introduction. The next big and murderous human pandemic, the one that kills us in millions, will be caused by a new disease, new to humans anyway. Odds are that the killer pathogen, most likely a virus, will spill over into humans from a non-human animal. David Quammen, welcome to the Big Sky Virtual Town Hall.
Thank you, Joe. Very good to be with you.
You've been on a few of these Zoom calls of late, I understand.
I've been on a few Zoom calls of late. Yes, indeed. I feel like I've spent half my time since the last week in January talking with people about this.
I'm sure. Tell me about just this introduction, this excerpt from the introduction to Spillover that I just read.
Oh, well, so I was researching that book 10 years ago, 12 years ago. It was published 8 years ago. At that point, it was very obvious to the scientists that I talked to my savvy select group of disease scientists, that what I came to call, following one of those scientists, the next big one, the next big disease outbreak that could turn into a pandemic, that it was coming. And they gave me, as a consensual scenario, they gave me the details. Yes, it will be caused by a virus. That virus will come out of a wild animal. What kind of a wild animal? Well, possibly a primate or a bat. What kind of a virus? Well, one that belongs to a family capable of fast evolution, for instance, an influenza virus or a coronavirus. Where might this occur, this spillover? Well, someplace where humans come in contact with wild animals, for instance, a wet market, or near a wet market in China, for instance. That was all there. That was all there. So in mid-January and late January, when this event appeared as a small dot on the horizon, I was asked to write an op-ed for the New York Times. They said, what do you want to write it about? I said, I want to write it about this coronavirus. I think it could be very dire. That was published on January 28th. And then finally, surprise started to set in for me as the virus spread, as the pandemic spread. And the thing that surprised me most was how utterly unprepared we were for it. The United States and a number of other countries, not every country, but I was just astonished by how unprepared this country in particular was to deal with this thing that not just my scientific sources, but scientists all throughout the disease community and public health officials had seen coming. And political leadership just paid no attention to the warnings.
What did places like Germany, places like South Korea, places who handled Australia, who handled this disease in a different way, this virus, what did they do differently?
Oh, there's a whole range of stories, and I've been keeping up with some of them, but I haven't been keeping up with all of them. In particular, I've been interested in Singapore and the Republic of Korea and Italy as very interesting cases. Germany also, as you say, Germany dealt with this firmly and efficiently. They had, I believe, their own testing capacity. We had faulty testing capacity in this country because of a contract with the CDC that turned out poorly. Singapore and the Republic of Korea, South Korea, both had been alerted very strongly by the original SARS event in 2002 and 2003. They were hit hard by SARS-1, and they took that warning to heart. South Korea was hit again by MERS, the Middle Eastern Respiratory Syndrome coronavirus that came out of Saudi Arabia in 2012, but then hit South Korea in 2015 and sickened a number of people and killed a number of people. So Singapore and the Republic of Korea in particular knew that you take a coronavirus seriously. If it's a new coronavirus and it's capable of transmitting readily from human to human and killing a certain number of the people that it infects, you take it very seriously from the start. And they did that.
But that's, yeah, absolutely. But that seems to be what the problem is that, you know, you spoke to MERS and SARS and, you know, Ebola, H1N1. Did we get collectively complacent because we dodged a number of, you know, this is the big one, viruses?
Well, the scientists and the public health officials did not become complacent. They became alert from those events. We dodged the bullet with SARS-1 in 2003. Some people say, yeah, SARS-1, you know, it infected a few thousand people. It infected 8,000 people, and it killed 10% of those, killed 774 people. And then people say, oh, and then it disappeared, it burned out. No, SARS-1 didn't disappear. It didn't burn out. It was stopped. It was stopped by very rigorous testing, tracing, isolation, quarantine in the cities where it occurred, strong public health measures. And fortunately for the world, it had spread to cities that had strong leadership, strong public health systems, strong governments, strong citizen buy-in, or else at least draconian measures. It spread to Beijing, Toronto, Singapore, Bangkok, and Ho Chi Minh City. No, Hanoi, excuse me. And so it faced strong governments and strong public health measures, and it was stopped. That didn't happen. Also, we had another advantage with SARS-1. It was infectious from human to human. There were a number of super spreader events when one person infected a couple of dozen people, in some cases healthcare workers, because they were trying to save a person who was having a respiratory crisis and nobody knew yet how dangerous this virus was, so they got infected. They weren't properly protected. But there was little or no asymptomatic spread. And now we've got this virus, which is the nightmare virus. It's a really nefarious virus because it is capable of asymptomatic spread. People who are walking around infected, shedding virus, feel no symptoms. And it has a great range of impacts, of clinical impacts on people. Some people never get sick. Some people get a little bit sick. Some people get very sick. Some people get very sick and then die after 3 months, like this actor, Nick Cordero. And the fact that it is such a nefarious virus, that it is capable of spreading so well among people who don't know they're infected, means that it, in the end, is going to be able to kill more people. It's an extremely well-adapted, successful virus, and I feel like it has it where it wants us right now.
You use the term nefarious. How concerned are you? How concerned is David Quammen about COVID-19 personally?
You mean in terms of my own personal health and my family? Well, I take it very seriously. I have been isolated with my wife very rigorously for the last 4 or 5 months. I wear a mask when I go into public, which I seldom do. We are isolated from my wife's family, most of whom also live in Bozeman. We see them either at more than a 6-foot distance outside, or we see them on Skype. We're taking it very seriously. Am I losing sleep about it? Not yet, no. I mean, I respect these dangerous viruses. I spent 5 years studying these crazy lethal viruses and traveling the world with scientists who search for them in the wild in their reservoir hosts. And I've climbed into caves in southern China looking for SARS, and I've gone out in the Congo looking to draw gorilla blood, looking for evidence of Ebola. And I have never been at a burning hot Ebola outbreak. And I have great respect for those journalists who have. My beat is not medical, my beat is scientific. So back to your question, am I nervous about it? No, I respect it very much. I have very little risk at this point. Again, I'm knocking on wood. When I start to travel more and do the research that I have to do for a book that I'm committed to do on this subject, I will take much more risk. I will try and calibrate that rationally. I'm worried for humanity, because I think this is going to get much worse before it gets better. And I'm worried for the people in the US who are being disproportionately hit by this. Poor people, people of color. I think that's crazy, unacceptable. That's what I'm nervous about, that's going to get worse before it gets better, and that we are politically dysfunctional now in this country and incapable of dealing with that problem. I'm sorry to be so gloomy.
No, yeah. No, it's, you know, it is, as you say, nefarious. You know, in this second round of, you know, spikes in Montana, of nationwide spikes that we're seeing, we are seeing younger people infected, and we appear to have fewer deaths and hospitalizations at this point. Has the coronavirus, the COVID-19 coronavirus, mutated? Are we seeing a new strain?
You know, people ask that question, has it mutated? Yeah, it's a truism to say that it is mutated. Viruses are constantly mutated as they replicate themselves. They're constantly making mistakes. Mutation is random, and most of those mutations just fall by the wayside. They're unviable for the virus, and they never go anywhere. The question is really whether this virus is evolving or has evolved as a consequence of the random variation that mutation supplies. You know, this is Darwin 101. A creature replicates itself, it makes mistakes, there's variation in the population, there's competition for which strains survive, survival of the fittest, evolution, adaptation. There is very little or no evidence that this virus has evolved since it's been in humans. I know of 1 or 2 studies that are saying it has, and I know of a lot of scientists who are saying, no, you're reading the data wrong. This virus has evolved, has branched apart, creating a tree of life very little since it has gotten into humans. And what's the reason for that? Well, the reason is probably that this virus is already so successful in its current form that it doesn't need to evolve in order to continue succeeding. When we get a vaccine, it will have a reason to evolve, and then try and evolve around that vaccine. Then we'll see some natural selection.
Sure, absolutely. That's a great answer. You know, David, what's important for people to know right now, and has that changed in the past 4 months?
I don't think it has changed. What's important for people to know is that this virus is among us. This virus is not going away. This virus is probably never going away from the human population. Your grandchildren, if you have grandchildren, are probably going to be vaccinated against this virus. And we need to take it seriously, despite the fact that it's invisible and despite the fact that it's innocuous, nearly innocuous, maybe, I don't know, 80% of the time. It's counterintuitive, but you need to take it seriously. You can't get tired, you can't get impatient. We're really just beginning this battle. And yes, it's hard economically for people who need to go out of the house to earn a living. I have huge sympathy for them. But still, we need to persist. We need to be patient. We need to be tough and realistic to get a handle on this thing. And so far we're not, partly because at the national level, we have had no clear message as to how this should be taken. You know, Tony Fauci stands up and tells the truth, and he's like a man running in sand. And the rest of the national leadership, we get denial, we get polarization, we get nothing. That's very frustrating to me.
You know, David, Lieutenant Governor Cooney spoke about being nimble in times like this, and everyone is finding that to be the case in however that manifests for them individually. You know, you were pulled off a project, essentially, a book project. You're working on a new book for Simon & Schuster about COVID-19. I wonder if you could talk just a bit about that pivot and what that meant and for you.
I'm happy to. And then let's get Matt Kidd in here. I want to hear what he has to say too.
Yeah.
So I had to make a pivot. You know, I'm a freelance writer. I'm used to working from home. Working from home is nothing new, except that I'm also used to traveling the world to do the research that allows me to come home and write articles and write books. And I can't do that now. I was in Tasmania during the month of February, following Tasmanian devil biologists around in the bush in order to gather information for a book on cancer as an evolutionary phenomenon. I won't go into all of that, but the Tasmanian devil has a very peculiar form of genuinely contagious cancer. And it's one strange phenomenon on a spectrum of phenomena that reveal that cancer is very much subject to Darwin's theory too. And that's an important thing to know. But it's not so important that Simon & Schuster didn't say to me in March, David, for the love of God, would you push that cancer book back on your desk and give us a book on COVID-19 more quickly, urgently. And so my usual operating principle is don't write books about things that other people are writing books about. In this case, it's the antithesis of that. It's a subject that everybody's going to be writing books about, but I'm going to try and write the very best that I can within the space of about a year and a half. Something that's neither the first book nor the biggest book on this subject, but I hope it'll be a unique book. It'll focus on the science in various different ways, and I feel like it's less an opportunity than a responsibility to do a book on this.
Absolutely. David Quammen, thank you very much. I really, we both really appreciate your time. It is an honor to have you on the show.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
Okay. Take care, David.